thank you everyone for joining us today for this BFS Industry Talk. My name is Nida Fatma, and here is where we invite the creme de la creme of the creative tech industry to come and share their experiences, insights, and knowledge on topics that surround us today. Our guest today is incredibly special. Someone who I have been following and been a fan of for many years is Robyn Haddow, a motion designer with a focus of on-screen graphics, heads-up displays, and holograms. Robyn spends most of her time imagineering fictional technology in story-based worlds, making sophisticated tech a reality. Her work has been featured in Spider-Man, Homecoming, Guardians of the Galaxy Vol.2, Black Widow, Wandavision, The Flash, and many more feature films. Robyn, it is so exciting and incredible for us to have you here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Nida. I know we've been trying to coordinate a session where we can schedule one of these conversations, so I'm glad that the time has finally arrived.
Yes, if I'm not wrong, I think I have been contacting you for a year and a half now.
It's something like that. You certainly a little while we've been going back and forth. So I'm happy that today worked out.
Yes, Robyn, would it be all right if we start off with your demo reel?
Please do. Yes.
I have it ready right here and share it.
Mister, guess me Skilla told me so. La 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 la, turn it down on the radio. La 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 la, my full summer about skill. Mister.
Wow, that's really incredible. I mean, the body of work is so extensive.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know about you guys. My playback was super steppy, but maybe everybody has better internet than me.
Yes. Zoom and internet. I hope
Right.
that played well for everybody, and do let us know in
I
the
was going to
chat.
say that if it was steppy for people, my website is just my name, robynhaddow.com, and you can view the reel on the website if anybody else had strange playback issues.
Okay, so this is available on Robyn Haddow. You can pull it up as well.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. So this is the website that we're referring to, robynhaddow.com, and then we can check out her reel right over here.
Perfect.
Robyn, this is so extensive, and of course, like we chatted, and you told me that you're working on newer productions, and those are under NDAs, and they won't be released for the next few years. So that's going to come up as well, and all our audience should be, waiting for that moment as well to check out that work. But I kind of wanted to start off with the beginning. So how did you get into creative technology? What kind of like open up the world for futuristic user interfaces and this line of work?
Oh, great question, Nida. Thanks. It was going back a while, I suppose. A couple years after I graduated from the digital design program at BFS, I wanted to track down my certificate. I'm so proud of it, the beautiful certificate that everybody receives when you graduate the program. But I was short on time, but I do have it framed in my house. And a couple of years following graduation, I started working in the video game industry. And I was working on AAA games, doing in-game cinematics and title sequences for video games. And the big game that was happening at the studio at that time was called DX. So there was a ton of future user interface design, screens, holograms, pods, and full MoGraph sequences. It was super exciting. And we were a small team that got to contribute to a lot of the artwork that you see in that video game. And then from there, it was working on a series of other of the video games that were happening at the studio, like Madden, FIFA 11, Madden 2012. So it was going back a little bit, and another interesting game that really resonated with me was working on Batman Arkham Origins, because there was a lot of future user interface and holograms and gauntlet projections that led to some super cool design. And it was working there that's introduced me to the whole universe of fictional user interface and screen graphics.
And did you kind of have any idea prior to, say, working at this gaming studio that this industry kind of existed, or were you kind of interested in user interfaces prior to working? So just as before everything.
Yeah, I remember when I was at school seeing Mark Holleran's portfolio, because he was one of the few individuals that I knew of that was doing that sort of work. And he was posting some of his publications and films online. And that sort of wet the whistle into what the whole field was and that sort of creative thinking. And then from there, somebody saw some of the work that I had done on Batman Arkham Origins and contacted me to come up with the art direction and set the tone and create a graphics package for the Flash TV pilot. And I thought that was such a really unique and special opportunity, because I'm a huge superhero fan and I really liked the Flash. And to me, when I saw some of the sequences of the pilot, I felt that the show was trying to do something cutting edge and new that we hadn't seen on TV and episodic TV before. And it was a whole like blank canvas for the graphics and what that could be and what that world could look like. So I really cut my teeth on a slew of design for those sets. And that was also my first introduction to playback, which is getting once you design and animate the graphics, it's then preparing them in such a way that they can play back on set, so that the continuity in the background is always, or the background's always active for continuity, and the screens are programmable by or controllable by an offset but behind the camera operator who can play and pause and cue the sequences as per the story points in the script. So it was sort of a giant step into a whole lot of new, learning that and getting it deliverable.
Right, during all the deadlines and crunch time and all the stuff that's happening.
Yeah, and the pilot was new and it had a lot of excitement around it, and things were evolving and changing on the production side of things. And then of course there's weather, so you factor in rain and you're switching sets and schedules and the number of monitors. At one point there's 3, for example, and then 10 minutes later it's a 6 up. All of a sudden you have 2 portrait monitors and then they're landscape. So it was a very early lesson to learn to be adaptable to the conditions and the requirements and still maintain some design and art direction through the process, which is sort of juggling a number of different balls at once.
Yeah, it seems like it is moving parts. It's not just one platform that you're designing for. It has to be adaptable and functional for multi-purposes, it sounds like.
I think the biggest trap that you get caught in as a designer in that specific scenario is you're so close to the design screen physically. You're physically close to the screen you're designing, and also mentally and emotionally, that it's easy to forget about the big picture, that this is a part of a set and a part of a production as a whole. So you can get caught up on little niggly details for type and line, which is super important. But at the end of the day, in those specific scenarios, it's sort of like you have to see the big picture and how's everything going to look together. And like, if you squint your eyes, is this going to be a cohesive set vision for what the whole thing is? And trying to maintain a general aesthetic whilst keeping up with story points and all of those things I just mentioned is sort of the bigger target, I think.
Very cool. And I was hoping that we could get a little deeper into some of your productions. I know that we chatted about Wandavision. Is that something I can pull up right here? And then I would love for you to just walk us through some of these shots that you've shared with us.
This was a super fun project. It was one of my favorite projects that I worked on. I collaborated with Stephen Laws, a creative director at Cantina Creative, and he had such a cool vision for what this light table could be in the world of, takes place in Sword Command in the Wandavision show. And what I really liked about collaborating with Stephen is that he pulls specific reference from various arenas, real world, art, previous shows that have been out there, and talks about very specific things with line and color and like tone and intent and mood and all of these sort of pieces that work to build a feeling. And I think those things are really important to always keep in your mind as you're designing. So to go back to that reference that's been specifically curated and detailed and talked about or deconstructed in a detailed way really helped keep me focused on creating a cohesive design within the world that we were trying to build together. So this was the light table inside Sword Command, like I said. And the tricky thing, or the challenging and unique thing about this, was that it was a triple layered glass table. And as we all know, glass, it has a lot of different properties that are fun to play with, and also have some technical challenges that you want to control. And with this, the biggest thing was that the information and the general OS lived in the middle of this hex, in the center of the table, like a brain. And the specific data that the chief was calling up in question, he says, "Give me a useful visual, damn it." I remember that part. And, to pull up the data from the epicenter of the brain, and it goes up from the bottom table monitor up one layer of glass, and then it filters up through another layer of glass. And to maintain, we can flip that, and you can see in order to maintain the integrity of the design and not keep the messaging clear and not muddy, was such a challenge. And Stephen was the one who perfectly color balanced the table and the contrast of all of the elements in a way that focused everything and kept everything sharp. And my role on the project was to come up with two different looks for what the tech could look like. This one being like more angle, broken windows. And it was a bit of a mashup between Skrull, Kree, Guardians of the Galaxy. So the design language evolved from Skrull, Kree, Guardians of the Galaxy. And I'm wondering if there was another faction in there. And the second direction, if you wanted to go up one more, maybe, can't remember, it doesn't really matter, is more of a human, I'll point it out when we get to it, was more of a human, this one, these two here, these three is what ultimately, anyways, it was more of a human militaristic, simple, old school OS look, yet still very contemporary and have that light holographic feel, because the technology that's displaying the information is glass. If you want to go back actually to that Cinema 4D screenshot, this was the hologram that was at one point in production, was living on the table. And then I think just down to the wire, it got cut from the show for whatever various reason. But what is it's exemplifying is the shape of the town and the hex and Wanda's magic. And every piece in the hologram works to send signals and display information of tracking her magic and her tech. And so this is Sword's visual of trying to control and understand and learn about who Wanda and on all of her magic is. You can see there's like a breach proximity in the far side on the closest to camera plane. There's a breach in the hex, and you can see the entry point, and there's a little W, like there's a Wanda tracker tag, because that's where her beacon is. And we're tracing signals from incoming and outgoing drones that are being sent in to learn and spy and do surveillance on the town. And it also shows the many different layers to the hex and to her magic. So that was a super fun hologram to build just because of the story, and how do you display all of the different quadrants in the town that they are watching over, in context of the show. So
Stunning, absolutely
yeah.
gorgeous. And the amount of thought process, rationale, logic that goes into even designing, something that we just see, like for myself, like I never knew that it had that level of detail that is showing her location and all the other environmental objects and their data. Um, how do you even think about that? Like, it seems like a lot more work than just a UI design. This is like deep UX.
You're right, Nita. It totally is. It's a total deep dive into the story and the backstory of Wanda and her character, like her family and her character, and where she is coming from within the overarching story of the Marvel universe. She's just come, I think we'd have to reference a timeline, but, and I don't want to give away too many spoilers of the show, but essentially she's constructed this dream town where this is her world that she's puppeteering, where it's her perfect version of her life to be with Vision. So yeah, this is just more data that's displayed in Sword Command of heat signatures and where entry points in and tracking civilians that could be possible threats or associated with various factions inside the hex.
Absolutely stunning. I have some more images from this project. So this is the class table, the interactive table right here with some of the screens displayed on it. And then
Yep, and we can keep going further because there was other devices and like handheld props like this that had significance in the show, in that they were story points that talked about CMBR, cosmic microwave background radiation, was this special frequency or this unique anomaly, this frequency that she was using her Darcy's tech, like her physical props, to see and source like where Wanda's entry points were coming from. And so how do you display CMBR frequencies? Like, what does that look like? So that was a fun assignment, doing research into what various types of frequencies were transmitted. And ultimately, when it came to the CMBR and the anomaly that was detected, I wanted to experiment, and I really got into color tearing and color splitting in all of the channels with audio tracks, and then just how do we grunge it up and make it look more exaggerated, how do you to show the bad, I guess, for lack of a better word at the moment, and that this frequency itself is super unique. So and then of course, if you go back to the one where she's holding the two props, then there was the old world on the right hand side. It was a lot of fun to build something, beside this very in-world fictional frequency spectrum display. And then we have an old world, very 8-bit looking graph, that's measuring the radiation. So I kind of like the juxtaposition of those two devices working in tandem to source the problem.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. These like the level of depth and the resolution, and there's so many details in here. Robyn, like, say this one project, what was the timeline for this project, for your work?
This was awesome, actually. This project was super fun. There was a really nice amount of time to come up with I think it was two different, directions and styles. And ultimately, in the end, I think it was even still a blend between the two different directions that we came up with. So it was a hybrid of what started out as a hybrid. So that's kind of cool. And actually, Ned, if you go to the very last image, this one is so fun because it's so well, that's a facial recognition beat, but that doesn't matter. This funny, like what a pleasure and what a joy to be asked to design something that referenced the 40s and the 50s. Never has that request come through. Normally it's always present day, 5 minutes in the future, 100 years in the future, and on a different planet in alien language. And when someone asked me to come up with a graphic that was displaying the weather on the news, I was like, oh God, like what, like what is even that even about? And he found some old clips from real time, like from back, like, I don't know, in the Wayback Machine on the internet, and found some old weather footage or weather forecasts from that era that were so inspiring, because at that time, people received their weather news from little cartoons, little characters. There was like a little weather vane character that was super charming and cute, and if it was cold out, ice cubes would fall down from the sky on this little weather vane character. I thought, oh, how fun. Why did that go away? Why are we looking at numbers and meters essentially nowadays? But this was just a really, really fun. It was so much fun to play, to look at some design trends in line and language and just shape from that era. And this graphic, so it played on one of the TVs in one of Wandavision, or Wanda's house, because the show, if you know or you don't already, it's like a nostalgic piece that spans decades. So it takes place in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it travels through time as a homage to the sitcom era and a love of sitcoms. So this one it was like just for a split second on the TV before I think a newscast came in. But that was a super fun assignment to be given.
I love it. It has the Saul Bass kind of design treatment with the offset kind of lines and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
I want to jump to our your next project, which is Black Widow, and there we go. I have this screen here, and this is, you're seeing the right screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, I would love to know a little bit more about your process for this production.
This was another one of my favorite assignments. I was invited to collaborate with Stephen again at Cantina Creative to come up with 2 different looks, or 3 different looks, can't remember anymore, for what Taskmaster's heads-up display could look like. And there weren't very many shots in the film to sort of see the point of view from Taskmaster's HUD, but there were a ton of reverse shots. There's 2 and another one at a different angle, that really the sort of task with this was to try to make something very old school DOS centric. The technology is coming out from like old world Soviet constructivist era theme design, and like early computing again, like, but yet still present day. So it's doing a little bit of research and playing with line in order to balance a right amount of complexity to make it more futuristic, yet that simple line work and color also is a big one, to go back into the older DOS terminal-esque displays. So this was super fun, and I think Carly Sirach was the graphic supervisor at Cantina Creative on the show. And so all these data points and these tracking, like all the story beats, I know they took care of with some of the other artists in-house. I wasn't involved in doing any of the story specific beats or compositing, but I was super excited to see some of the final comps, because of course I had just delivered concepts of flat graphics of the visor frame, and so to see it blended, with some lensing and optical effects, and also play with the story points, was a real treat. Like, that's where the harmony and the magic comes alive in the shot. So I always like working with Carly, because she's got such a beautiful design hand. Every time if I'm working on something, like, can you take a look at this? I need a little bit of Carly touch, because she is another super talented artist.
Very cool. And this is a POV shot, and then before this, we actually see the interface. And
Buddha, that's booting up in the 3/4, yeah.
So that one, right? Yeah. And moving forward, could you talk a little bit about these shots that are like the POV shots?
Yeah, why don't we talk a little, now that you've seen sort of some of the final comps from the show. I think I might have sent you a few of the icon dev preliminary work that I had done quite extensively in trying to develop the language that was to be like a futuristic terminal-esque old school DOS approach. And again, Stephen had curated some wonderful reference of, I think even some from like NASA ships, and to look at, real world panels and some throwback terminals as well. And to develop a consistent and cohesive iconography, or that language, was to be the backbone of Taskmaster's HUD and for this project. And anytime I got caught up in a story point or something wasn't working, I was like, oh yes, he said, focus on the icons, focus on the icons. And that was sort of my mantra for this assignment, was because at the end of the day, the icons are telling the story, and that Taskmaster's superpowers are to scan the environment, and then they enter into what is called mimic mode, and they can machine learn the moves. You see the red that's crossing the environment, that's the scan that wipes through the environment, and that's the first step that enables mimic mode. And what that does is ultimately Taskmaster can scan the environment and then their opponent and beat them at their own game by learning all their moves and predicting ahead of time what fight or how to play and how to tire them out and win eventually. So here there is like a ton. I've got like perimeter lock, perimeter scans, radar, environment sweep, of course record, because the machine is memorizing via recording and camera and technology, and the playback of that, how the opponent moves and the topography of the environment, navigation cues, battery. Sorry, I always like that when you see just a little, either like a Wi-Fi or connectivity or some sort of battery level to hint to the OS, sort of grounds it into a reality that we're familiar with when we look at our phones. Or I always like to include a little nod to our reality as a sort of familiar icon or reference to us and what we know.
Yeah, absolutely. Like what we're familiar with, and what we've been seeing, and now we can interpret it as it's happening in this world space.
That's right. And to combine it with something totally fantastical, like a hexagon shape, for example. This is a solid hex line, or even like more breakup in the hex line, immediately alludes to something techy and sci-fi and futuristic, just because we're conditioned in seeing that style and that shape in those sort of graphics. So it's always fun to try to think of different ways of how to make a better hex.
Yes, I mean, I wonder how many ways there are, but I know that there is one expert in the room who's done a lot of work on this. So I will continue to follow your work and see. Robyn, it's so incredible to have you speak about your work and go into this detail and share it with us, because obviously, like we're never thinking about all these details, but really to hear it from you, the work is just expanded at this huge level. And for myself, just like hearing you speak about the depth of the UX and the rationale behind the story, and keeping that character very integral, it's really fabulous. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear, Nida.
I have one question for you before we jump into our audience Q&A. So audience, thank you so much for being here. We love the fact that you joined us today. And if you have any questions for Robyn, please go ahead and share them in the chat, and we'll start addressing them right after this. Robyn, the last question that I have from our pre-prepared topics is a little bit about if you can offer some advice for our designers out there who are interested in entering into futuristic and fantastical user interfaces, looking into this kind of design space. What is some advice that you would be able to share?
That's a great question. I get asked that a lot, actually, and it's always when I feel like I'm a little bit caught on the spot, because I don't think, like, there's all kinds of interesting things and points to discover and share from personal experience. And then, of course, I love to ask that to other people to hear what they say and what struck them. And ultimately, I think it's to have a curiosity about technology and how things work and why things work the way they do, and also to develop a sense of what you like, you as an individual, and what your taste and sort of what gets you going, because those and developing an eye for that is ultimately going to parlay into your creative pursuit and your creative growth, and will help contribute to make you a genuine or authentic artist in a way that you in using an outlet that you like. So you'll be making work that you yourself like, if you can get an understanding by looking at other people's work, what you like, what you to understand, to see what you like. I think it changes over time too. So it's constantly something that I like to check in with myself, to also while understanding trends, and to see what is ebbing and flowing and coming full circle back into play, and understanding, oh, I used to really like that, and now I think it's sort of goofy, or hey, that's super cool. I've never noticed that before, yet I've seen this piece 10 times, it's always a growing and evolving and changing list.
Absolutely. Okay. Yes. And I guess really having your own visual style and that language kind of develop for yourself, and having that curiosity kind of be the driver for developing that language. I love it. I totally agree
And
with
to play in different other aesthetics, to not always have like one, um, oh, I do this always this way. Like it's important and healthy, and it feels good too to try messing up in a different style just to be a bit of a chameleon in order to meld with different requests or different shows or feel comfortable in different styles. But to, work outside the box feels bad at first, but that's ultimately another way that you can grow.
Mhm. Absolutely. I love the fact that you're being asked to design technology that's going to be featured 100 years from now. So it's really, you got to be very imaginative.
Right. Yeah. Or like in another universe,
Alien
like what
planet.
is that about? I don't know either, but I'm constantly looking on Earth for different motivations and uh, sources of inspiration and
Yes.
elements that are iconic in order to ground these sort of ethereal endeavors.
Yeah, it's no pressure. Yeah, with
Yeah, right,
developing stuff, just what
right,
the aliens do. That's all you need
right.
to know. Okay. We have some questions from the audience. Everyone watching, thank you so much for your questions. And please do keep on sharing. We've got some questions right here. I'm going to start with the first one. The first question is from Evan. In the film world, how welcomed or understood is the perspective slash direction of a UI or digital designer? Do you have to fight to get your designs done the way you want them?
Wow, that's a great question, Evan. That's a big one. What I can say is that every show is different. Every show is different, and every assignment on the show that you're given is different, and every role that you play on said assignment for said show is also very different. So um, it's not like a cut and dry answer at all. Some shows and directors really welcome and look to uh, the designer for a style and art direction and approach and a design wherein the canvas is wide open, and some directors have a very precise clear vision of what this is going to look like and how the story is going to be told. So ultimately, as a designer, I mean, you are the hands. You are the hands, and you have all the ideas. But at the end of the day, it's collaborating with the team or the production directly, or however you're involved in the project, in order to work together to birth this new baby.
Mhm. Yeah, it's never been done before. Absolutely.
Yeah, does that answer your question? I don't know. It's sort of a tricky one, and that's sort because there's not really one answer to that. So,
I
um,
think that's really spot on, because it depends on the production and the team.
yes, and what's required, I suppose, in order to tell the story. Ultimately, everybody's working on telling the best story for the show, so that's the backbone of the project.
Mhm. Yeah. Are you ready for your next question?
Yeah, I don't know. Am I doing so well?
Okay, let's go for it. Uh, Ileda Alpar is asking, are there times when you get tired and can't find an idea? I mean, when you are doing things, I mean, what are you doing these times? What is your motivation?
Certainly, yes. There's times where sometimes a ton of feedback has come in and it's crisscrossing because directions have changed and the point of what you're doing has shifted or the direction has shifted. So you can feel kind of cloudy in your mind about like what are we seeing here or what are we trying to visualize, or you can have a very clear directive and just wonder like I don't know what I'm going to do here. And it sounds so silly, but I just go for a walk because sitting here trying to do like idea or like have something to produce is just doesn't work. So I find if I step away from the computer and I go outside and take a walk or go for a run, I can you're not thinking about it and so focused or determined and hell bent. You're focused on your environment and engaging other senses so that like honestly like an idea just comes. Like that's just what happens. So then you're like, oh wow, I'm so glad like I stepped away for an hour or two because now I can just sit down and I know what I need to do and I can try this. And ultimately, if that doesn't end up being like the answer, it serves as an offshoot or a jumping point from which you're like, oh, now that I've tried this, that's not exactly right. I'm going to play with combining these two elements or this thought with this visual, and at least it gives you a fresh breath of fresh air. Silly enough to try something new.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. You're sort of like engaging with your subconscious mind when you kind of separate yourself, walk away, and that's when the deeper thoughts kind of become more resonated. And
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
yeah. Next question is from Yorkwin Walters, and he is asking, what was your basic or first knowledge? Were you just a graphic designer, motion graphics artist? What was your first job in the industry? Um, or what was adjacent to the industry? Or was it adjacent to the industry?
That's kind of a great question. I graduated from the digital design program in 2007, and at that time, motion graphics was certainly not very happening in Vancouver, and very much in its like heyday, in LA and New York and other various Australia cities around the world. But there weren't very many people doing it in Vancouver, and certainly nobody knew what it was. So, uh, like a very confident young graduate, as soon as I graduated from the program, I opened a studio with some of my friends from the program because we
Nice.
knew everything.
Yeah.
And we were able to do it all. So that was my first job in the industry. We had a design studio that did web, motion, and print, and we were called Normal Design. We are normal. And that was a very fun time. And we set up shop with two of my good friends. And that whole brand, I still love the brand campaign that we came up with for that company because it was such a juxtaposition of normal and not normal. And we incorporated all kinds of little sneaky hints and jokes in the typography and branding of our company, where we cut the bottom letters off of the word. And we used really um, um, everyday like ubiquitous font Helvetica for the company mark, but we snuck in, I think like it was an Arial or something, or some different sort of an A, just because that's not normal.
Mhm.
And anyways, I could go on about that for quite a while because that was a very fun time. But I then went into video games. So I'm sorry, I lost track. I think that was your question.
Yeah, that was the question. How you, what was the first sort of like initial job? Did you start off as a graphic designer or motion designer? So you
Yeah,
set
all of
off.
it. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah,
It was more educating clients what motion graphics was at that time, and explaining to them the power of moving type. Kinetic type was a huge trend back then, and using that as a tool for advertising, and essentially just saying, okay, we'll build your website, and like, let us give you some motion graphics. You need some motion graphics for your company.
I hear you on that.
Yeah.
Yes. You have one more question, and this question is from Arturo, a fantastic designer who is actually one of our students right now in digital design. He is asking, what's the next thing for you to learn?
Oh, well, I think there's a lot to be said for some of the real-time softwares that are being used heavily in production already, like Unreal, for example. Definitely real-time renderers for working inside of a 3D package. I work inside Cinema 4D, so you've got Redshift, Octane, and
V-Ray,
yeah, I just slipped my mind. I think there's a couple other ones, but
Renderman, V-Ray, and all these guys. I know which one. Arnold.
yes, that's what I was going to say, right? And so definitely trying to harness some of that power can only elevate your learning and career just by understanding and speed, and keeping up with industry trends, because that's sort of where the bar is now.
I love that. Unity and Unreal and the kind of rendering that's coming out of there. It's just gorgeous.
Crazy. It's mind-blowing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Robyn, I do have one last question, and this is from Michelle, and she's asking, what's your ultimate favorite feature film for its futuristic user interfaces?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I've got to say I love Big Hero 6, the Disney animated film. My very good friend Jace Hansen was the UI designer and animator, and came up with the concepts for the fictional graphics in that film. And that's funny, that's the first one that comes to my mind, so I'm going to say that one. And I'm a huge fan of animation and Disney's storytelling, and he's such a wonderful designer, such a joy to look at the complexity and the simple messaging that he puts into his design work. So certainly that's the first one that comes to my mind.
I love that film. I'm going to watch it again just for the UI, and I vaguely remember parts of it, but I definitely need a refresher. And I do remember the beauty and the freshness of the UI.
So good, so fun.
Yeah. We just have one last question that's popped up. If you have a little bit of time to answer it,
Yeah.
From Laura, and she's asking, do you recommend any platform or courses to learn FUI motion design?
Oh, wow. People have asked me that a lot in the past, and I don't know that there is any specific course ultimately, because as a designer, like you're designing for that specific situation. And so it's more about listening to the client and understanding. It's like, oh, what do you mean? But like understanding a little bit of everything, because it's just understanding and being curious, I suppose, about technology and how things work in the real world, and how can you break that in order to push it to be different or to go farther. So I certainly think it's understanding also what was done in the past in terms of graphics and real world application, in order to understand the basis or the foundation of how things work, and say, okay, so that's how it used to physically produce or compute and display. So how can we break that and push the boundary to make that present day, and then again, even more 10 years, 50 years into the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. I hear you. And its stuff is changing, like you mentioned earlier. So that's our wrap for our Q&A. And I just want to take a moment, Robyn, and thank you so much for being here today. It was such an honor to have you and share and talk about your work. I think you have opened up so many new doors for a lot of our audience. And I think a lot of people are going to be watching Big Hero 6 tonight, hopefully soon.
So good. So good.
I just want to give you an opportunity real quick to share any last words with the audience. And if you have any social media handles where people can go and check out your work, that would be great if you can share that too.
Oh, well, thank you, Nida. Thank you so much for inviting me and everybody who's listened and joined the conversation. It's been a real thrill to, it's unfortunate we're not in person, because when we were first talking, I was excited to go back to the theater and visit the campus. Such fond memories there. I'm kind of social media quiet just because it's so busy all the time. But I suppose the one that I use or I'm active the most on is Twitter. That's just my name, at Robyn Haddow. And I need to update my website. That's been on my to-do list now for many years, but that's also something that lives online. Yeah, so if anybody's curious about things or anything, feel free to write me an email. I will get back to you, if not right away, definitely at some point. And this was just a ton of fun. So thank you very much for having me.
No, it's the pleasure is all ours. Thank you so much to the audience for being here. We love the fact that you are a part of our creative technology conversations. We do have some events coming up, and we would love for you guys to check them out on vfs.edu. One of them is our digital design industry showcase, where our students present their graduate work on December 14th. So keep an eye out for that. And for now, I would like to just tell everybody to take care and stay safe. Robyn, thank you one last time. It was such a pleasure. And we're going to have you back here sometime soon again. Hopefully.
I like that. Thank you.
In the theater, for sure.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.